SOFLA, Synchronous Online Flipped Learning Approach. And this is being recorded for Michigan TESOL, the conference November 7th. My name is Helaine Marshall. I'm from LIU, Long Island University, Hudson campus, and also MALP LLC. And I'm going to be talking to you about SOFLA, which is a distance learning model that closely replicates actual classroom teaching and includes structured, interactive, multimodal activities, both synchronous and asynchronous. And you will be learning how to implement an 8-step learning cycle, and you'll have resources to guide you in using SOFLA. I am someone who is involved in language education, like we all are, and I have research interests in culturally responsive and sustaining education, which is my other hat. That's MALP, the Mutually Adaptive Learning Paradigm for SLIFE, students with limited or interrupted formal education. And for today, it's instructional technology, especially flipped learning. So come with me on a journey. Now, before we begin, I have a mantra for you. This is my overall philosophy regardless of any presentation I give. We always start with the mantra, create fertile spaces. And what I mean by that is that we want to focus in our instruction not on delivering instruction or covering curriculum or meeting standards. What we need to do for our Ls, multilingual learners, emergent bilinguals, is to create fertile spaces for learning. And in order to do that, we need 4 E's. And the 4 E's, which I will refer to along the way today: equity, which is just the beginning; enrichment, essential; engagement, a must-have; and finally, empowerment, which is not a transitive verb, by the way. Okay, so keep this in mind throughout the presentation. I'm going to show you a similar slide at the end, and we'll see if it looks a little different to you then. Now, before we get into the meat of the presentation, I want you to stop, because I did give you pre-work. This is a flipped presentation, which means that before you watch this video, I am asking you to do some tasks ahead of time. You'll get more out of it and it'll be more fun if you go to this Google form. And there at the Google form is the pre-work. If you go and do that now and then come back and watch the presentation, it will be more meaningful for you. So bye, see you in a minute. And when you come back to slide 4. Welcome back. Now that you've done the pre-work, here's how we start. We are in survival mode. Because we're in survival mode, let's turn to Darwin. And Darwin had this to tell us, that it's not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent, but the one most responsive to change. And so what does change look like? It's difficult, I know. And David Rosen, from the Links listserv on instructional technology, has 3 guidelines, and I've added a 4th, to remind us what we are dealing with when we're looking at change and surviving change. First, we're not starting from scratch. Some things will have equivalencies. We may be able to keep certain items that we've done for years with our students. The second is that there will be limitations. Be cognizant of that. There are things that you'll have to give up. Some activities that I've had to give up that only work kinesthetically with my students. That happens, and we need to accept it. On the other hand, there are advantages. Sometimes there are going to be things that you can do even better or differently in a positive sense when you're doing them at a distance. And finally, believe it or not, this will lead to innovation. Perhaps it's under pressure, but it's innovation. And we can always be on the lookout for something totally new that springs from adversity and creativity that we're going to use as we move into these new spaces that we are creating, fertile spaces that we are creating. So let's start with flipped learning. SOFLA is a combination of online learning and flipped learning, and I've put them together to make a recipe for effective instruction. So if you're not familiar with flipped learning, this is a very quick idea of what it is, but if you go to the flippedlearning.org website, you will see tons of information about flipped learning. That's an organization that is free for all to share and learn about flipped learning. Our definition that we published in 2014 is here on the slide. And to the right of the definition are the 4 pillars of flipped learning. And on this slide is the essence of the model. Basically, what you're doing is that you are delivering information and content, and we'll look at what that looks like in a minute, outside of the class. So that in class, you can devote your time to creativity and interaction and application, the upper levels of bloom. So that means that out of class will be the lower levels of bloom. Now, oversimplified to be sure, but this is a good starting point. So let's take a look. Now, when you flip, there are 4 questions. Heather Paris and I worked on an article. You can read the entire article, but a portion of it deals with these questions. So here are your main questions when you flip, and this applies to online flipping as well as face-to-face in-person flipping. What do you move out of class and in class? Part of it is bloom, but there's more involved, which we'll see. And out of class means, for us today, asynchronous, and in class means synchronous. Secondly, for the asynchronous piece, out of class, your job is to make sure that you're maximizing comprehension and retention by your students. That has to happen. If they don't understand it and can't retain it, you're wasting their time and yours. You'll have to reteach. Then the next question is, once they come to class, in your virtual classroom, your synchronous classroom, that's your time to maximize interaction and differentiation. And we'll look at how you can do that with SOFLA. And the final point to remember in your head for both asynchronous and synchronous, out of class and in, is constantly make sure there's accountability. Otherwise, we can't be sure it happens. Everyone isn't like us, right? Integratively, intrinsically motivated. And feedback. Always feedback. They give each other feedback. They give you feedback. You give them feedback. Lots of feedback in all directions. Okay, so keep these 4 questions in mind. They pertain to SOFLA, not only SOFLA, all flipping. So let's look at the model. There are 8 steps. Now I'm going to take you very quickly through the 8 steps. There will be no examples, just minimally. When we meet for our live Q&A on November 7th, I'll have examples ready to show you in addition to your discussion with me about SOFLA. So then we'll have more time to look at some examples. Now I'm just going through the 8 steps. And here are the steps. Pre-work, sign in, whole group application, breakouts, share out, preview and discovery, assignment instructions, and reflection. They are linear steps. However, what we really are looking at here is a cycle. So there's our cycle. And you'll notice the pre-work is yellow because it's the key. If the pre-work doesn't go well, everything falls apart after that. So we're going to take a look now at the steps. We start with the pre-work. These are guidelines for pre-work. It's basically explicit instruction provided asynchronously. It needs to be structured, interactive, and multimodal, and you have to have targeted embedding questions and activities. It has to involve interaction with you, with the students, with the students together. It must be interactive along the way, not at the end, all along. And then the other piece is the learner analytics piece. What you want to do is download all the data that you can get from the pre-work. When you get that data, you then plan your lesson based on what they understood, partially, didn't, who got what. There's that differentiation piece. You will see how the data will inform your instruction. So that's a very important part of the pre-work. Now, we need to look more closely at TESOL. I'm going to show you a slide that's packed. We can revisit this when we meet. Basically, we have 4 types of pre-work, and you mix and match them as you need depending on your classroom. First, most obviously, language. We're going to have exposure to authentic samples, tons of exposure to the language, but careful exposure to be I+1. Then we're going to give them explanations. What would be your mini lesson if you're teaching them a grammar point or introducing vocabulary, whatever it is that you're teaching, that's where you put it, in the out of class. You can also do the low levels of Bloom, practice exercises, learning strategies, which may not sound like low level of Bloom, but if you're explaining a strategy, looking at the context when you read, you could make a video for that. Also, listening passages. You don't need to do that in class. They could do that out of class as long as you've embedded some points of reference for them and you get data from their listening. Finally, peer work, not finally, they can be doing projects, they can work on peer instruction, and of course online interaction, whether that's wikis or blogs they do together or an actual forum, whatever you like. There's plenty of time for peer work. And the references are there on the slide. Finally, maybe you don't think you talk much, but you do. The research shows 65 to 90% teacher talk. So get that out of there. You can record your course procedures, your assignment instructions, and that's even better than giving them in class. Remember we talked about advantages of this. They can always go back not just to read it, but to see you explaining it with your mouse and your gestures and everything about you. You can be explaining the course. I always do it for the syllabus, for my LMS, and other purposes, anything that's procedural. Okay, so all of these things can be flipped. It doesn't mean you have to do them all, but these are all suggestions. Now, what I use is PlayPosit. You can use whatever you like, of course. Edpuzzle is another one, and I'm sure there'll be others you'll think of. I will demonstrate PlayPosit when I see you. Basically, you put in a video lesson that you've created, or someone else has created. I use other people too. And then you put in the interactions and questions. And there's tons of different interaction types in PlayPosit. The basic is free. I know you're thinking that. For more robust PlayPosit, which gives you detailed data, it does cost, but it's not prohibitive. So that's something to keep in mind. I find it very helpful to use PlayPosit, and the students enjoy it. It gives them a chance to pause, rewind. They can even watch it again. There's a feedback piece at the end where they can give feedback to you. Also, you can give feedback on wrong answers or misconceptions to them that you preload into the application. It's really wonderful. And the other one I use is for reading, and that's Perusal. Equally wonderful. In Perusal, you order the textbooks or any uploaded passages for reading or articles you've written or others have written, anything you have the right to upload or that the students pay for as their book. All the material is digital. It goes into Perusal, and they all share the same copy. So alongside, they are interacting with the material, and so are you, asynchronously. Although if they're on at the same time, they can even talk to each other, synchronous. So it's a remarkable way to make reading shared, social, motivating. You know, students sometimes don't do the reading. This way they will, because fear of missing out, everyone else is there. My students love it. I do have some who prefer the print versions because maybe they're older students and they prefer that, or maybe they have some special need. that makes them want to have their own copy. But you can take notes, you can highlight, you can do everything. So that's another piece of pre-work that I use. All right, so now we're going to come to the second piece of the model, sign-in. Sign-in can be anything you like. You can do a cognitive type of a sign-in. Here you can see I showed them a Steven Pinker video, and I wanted to know what surprised them, puzzled them, inspired them. The accountability is that if they didn't watch the video, what are they going to put? The sign-in they always do on a whiteboard with their name. That's the way I take attendance, see who's late, see who didn't do the pre-work. I also can use a textbook chapter for that. So here in my multicultural class, the other was the SLA. This is multicultural. I don't do direct ESL right now. So I'm giving examples from my own instruction, but you translate it to your classroom. And I have a question from the chapter, and my sign-in is, can teachers help? What can we do? And then I also do talk about the affective domain in the sign-in. Sometimes they just need that. So I've asked them how COVID-19 is affecting them professionally or personally, and that's our sign-in, our kickoff that night. Or I might ask them, as I did at the beginning of the semester, what are your plans for fall teaching? And they like to share and find out where everyone else's head is at. So the sign-in is wide open, but you see here some possibilities for what to do for the sign-in. And as I said, I'll show you more examples when we meet. Then the whole group application is a dangerous step. I call it the dangerous step. This is where the teacher in you wants to take control and teach again. Don't teach it again. You need to be patient. Don't be punitive, but be patient. If anyone didn't do the pre-work, they'll have to go back around and do it, because this is where you clarify misconceptions that you got from your data, and or you apply it and do something new based on an understanding that they've done the pre-work. And this is your chance. This is your chance to lead and guide and facilitate, but not give direct instruction, right? This is really an important step to solidify the material that you're working with. And you don't have to waste time with something that everybody understood. Now they get it, right? And if only one or two people didn't, then you differentiate and you have ways to meet just with those students and clarify for them. And there are many different multimodal ways to have the whole group application take place. So that's step 3. Now we go to step 4. The students love it. It's their favorite step because they get to interact with each other in small groups away from you. They like that. So you have to build that in. Now I'm not going to spend time on this slide because you already know everything on here. You've done group work. So you either do jigsaw or they do the same activity. You make them accountable because they're doing a whiteboard with notes. You know who's in what room. Sometimes you can even ask who's contributing what if you choose to do that. As far as how you group, it's up to you. Every time I do it differently. Or you can have groups for the whole class, the whole semester. You decide how you want to group them. I change it up depending on the topic for the breakouts, and I decide how I want to group them, homogeneously, heterogeneously, or by those that have had a certain course beforehand and others haven't, etc. Whatever you want to do. But the breakout is an important piece, and step 4. There's another way to do it, which is the peer instruction. And this one I worked on with Carolina Rodriguez Buitrago from Colombia, Bogota, and she helped me to fashion a rather complex version of it. But whatever version you choose to use, it's a key piece if you can fit it in sometimes, because as we know from Glasser, I think it was, who said, you don't remember what you read as well as what you see, as well as what you view, what you hear and what you view, and what you discuss, etc. But the ultimate, like 90%, you retain if you've taught it. So it's good for our students to get a chance. And this slide details the steps involved in the way that I do peer instruction. But as I said, you can do whatever version of it appeals to you, but it's an option for the breakouts. I don't usually have them do peer instruction for the whole class because that can be very intimidating if you have a large class. If you have a small class, fine. And then we come to step 5, which is share out. So after the peer instruction or the breakouts, they come back together and they share. What was it like? What are they taking away? And this is a chance, if they did do some material on a whiteboard, you can call and say, group two, let's see what you've done. And of course, you can go into each room, talk to them during the breakouts, and you know what's going on in those rooms, so you can decide how you want to do the share out. You don't want to embarrass anyone. Maybe you have a group that did very well that can share and the others watch. You don't have to have everybody share everything. You decide again how that's going to go. So they can compare what they each came up with. If it's jigsaw, you do kind of have to get around to everyone. So you have to think about that. And on the right-hand side, you see the peer feedback. The peer feedback technique that I use is from Khalid Fethi, who came up with SHAC. And the students really enjoy this because it's not overly controlled or overly free. It's nicely in the middle. It tells them I can share something that I have from my experience, my background. I can help somebody with something that I notice that I want to give them advice about. I can ask a question if I'm not clear on something or I'd like to know more. Or I can simply make a comment of some kind. But a lot of times students are a little nervous about giving each other peer feedback and it doesn't work so well. Well, this gives them a way. They can say, oh, I'm going to use the S or the H or the C or the A. Okay. So anyway, peer feedback. Oh, that's cute. That's cute. We're not editing this. We're just moving on. Okay. The next step is a very important one. It's probably the second most important after pre-work. And the reason I say that is that preview and discovery is the step that ensures that they do the pre-work. Don't skip it. I have skipped it on occasion and regretted it. So, because I didn't have time, I thought, what you want to do in the pre-work, there's cognitive and affective here. So, the affective piece is you want to motivate them to do the pre-work, the next step of whatever your lessons are. And so if you show them a little bit of it and you show them some interesting pieces, that motivates them. It makes them curious. And you get them involved already so they kind of feel connected to the material. So it's not just go home and do chapter this or go home and watch the video. You show them little pieces. And so there they are. They're already there. They're already connected, curious, motivated. The cognitive piece is you can ask them questions and find out what is their prior knowledge. How much are they ready to learn this material? You can pre-teach some vocabulary, some concepts. This is your chance to fill in some prior knowledge that you know they're going to need, and you can tell, whoa, this is going to be a little too much for them. Not their ZPD, zone of proximal development. So if you sense that, this is your chance. So this guarantees, not 100%, nothing is, but it pretty much guarantees that the pre-work will be accessible to them, they will benefit from it, and they'll probably do it. So absolutely, step 6. And then we come to step 7, which might seem very straightforward, and it is, which is you tell them what the pre-work is exactly. You map out, here's what you're going to do for next time. If there's a video, this is what it is. If there's a reading, if it's a discussion forum, or it's in perusal, or if it's a blog on your platform, or they're working on a wiki or a project, whatever it is that you want them to do. And the only caveat here is multiple iterations. So you announce it orally in class, you have it in writing in class on a little notepad. You also put it on your platform in a very obvious place. I have weekly checklists that I post every week. Here's what you do this week. Here's the item. Here's a little icon to remember what it is. And then here's the link to it. So I have 3 columns and I do weekly checklists. Not in every class, but in the classes where I think it's complex and they may not catch everything. Otherwise, you can just have a list. The third way that you tell them the instructions for next time is in an announcement that you push out to them. So all 3 are important. Different people access different ways. So if you have it all 3 ways, you're reaching everyone. You can also send a reminder, a follow-up reminder. So those are the instructions. You know there are 8 steps in SOFLA. We've come to step 8. So step 8 is a reflection. And at the end of the synchronous session, they know ahead of time, I'm going to ask them this. It's the same every time. What sticks? What are you taking away? And they only pick one thing. I said, I'm sure you did tons of things during this session and you learned a lot. Don't just say, great class, learned a lot. I'll erase it. I'll take it away. They know that they have to pick one thing that sticks with them. And it doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter to me. I want to know what sticks with them. So it's not an exit ticket. And everybody puts what they remember the most. And everyone sees them all. Just like the sign-in, they put their name, they're accountable, and everyone sees what they put, and everyone sees everyone else's. I also post on my platform every time the sign-in, the breakout materials they produced. If we did a whole group application that resulted in a shared experience that had notes to it, that goes up there too, and the reflection. So everything we produce during the synchronous session, in addition to the recording of the synchronous session, it's like in case someone was late or absent or had to leave early, or maybe they were presenting something and they want to watch themselves, everything's recorded. So we keep all the material. There's one of those advantages of our online, okay? So this is an important piece, is it's transparent and kind of permanent, everything that you have from your synchronous session. And the reflection is no exception to that. And so I've taken you through the 8 steps of SOFLA very quickly, but we will have time to meet. Now I want to show you the next slide. This is important. This is you and me. So we have 4 things here. First of all, I'd like you to reflect. So I want you to go to this Google form and post your reflections, all right? I have 3 questions that help you reflect in 3 different ways. So go and do that. It won't take you long, and I will read them before we meet. And that will help me to know what resonated with you, what you still wonder about, what questions you still have. Then I'd like you to join me November 7th, 3:10 to 4 for a live Q&A. I'll see you there. Then the 3rd item is perusal. I've set up perusal for us. It has all my articles and videos on SOFLA. And you can go in there, and I'll see you there. You get a student account, it's free, and you join our course. You need a code, and there it is. You don't have to buy any textbook or anything. You don't have to buy anything. All of this is my copywritten material. It's mine. So you can access all of it and talk to me and each other. So go into our course. And then also, of course, you can email me. I answer emails pretty quickly, so send me an email. And I'm glad that you attended this session. There's a couple more slides to show you after this final step 8 of yours. The first is just to show you the model again. And if you look at the cycle, can you say to yourself, yes, I see the steps. You see the cycle, you see the steps. Yes? SOFLA. And finally, the fertile spaces. Do you remember? Equity, enrichment, engagement, and empowerment. And now I'm going to leave you with this. I want you to think about this. Equity is represented by the pre-work, because the pre-work is where they get access. And access is the important beginning. They can each take what they need the way they need it. That's equity. More about it when we meet. The second piece of the model adds enrichment, fosters integrative and intrinsic motivation. That's what you do with your sign-in in your whole group application. You enrich their learning by putting other creative activities that work with the material, that involve them and that make them think, and that are more like upper levels of bloom. You're enriching their education. Now you've got them motivated, so they're ready to engage. And that's what you do when you send them to breakouts and bring them back for share out. You step back. It's all about them in the breakout and share out steps. So that's where the engagement and participation comes into play. And finally, you send them out with the preview and discovery, the assignment instructions, and the reflection, where they take ownership of their learning and move on to the next steps and feel self-empowered. So I hope you like creating fertile spaces with the 4 E's and SOFLA, and I will see you all on November 7th. Thank you very much. Bye.